Welcome to Caversham Road, an area of Reading shaped by Victorian aesthetics and innovation. Join us to explore the area's rich history and architecture.
I'll be guiding you along the streets around Caversham Road, and we'll be stopping along the way to look at the area's buildings, street scenes and some of its fascinating history.
I'll be looking in more depth at some of the area's industries, along with a prominent church and its connections with Reading's commerce and local government.
And I'll be looking at the area's Victorian architecture, the wealth of beautiful and sometimes quirky original features that you could still see today.
We start our virtual tour of the Moderation near Caversham Bridge, a pub with a rather unusual name. As far as you're aware, the only other pub with the same name in the country is in London. The unusual name, and the fact that there are no pubs in the back streets in the area, could mean that it was originally a temperance house. But there's no evidence to support this, and as far as we're aware, it's always been a pub. The building you see today was built in 1893, the typical example of a late Victorian roadhouse. But as you'll see from the picture, is not the original. The original is more of a country-style pub and was built around 1865. You can see that the landlord, Richard Webb, clearly wanted to produce some marketing materials for the new pub when it was built. Walking along Caversham Road away from the bridge, we arrive at York Road. Today the shop on the corner sells and repairs scooters. But back in the early 20th century, for many years it was a butcher's, as you'll see from this picture. You can also see quite a lot of the original features on the shop to this day, including the dentilation above the shop front. Further along Caversham Road we arrive at the junction with Swansea Road. From here, in the distance, looking along Swansea Road, you can see E.P. Collier School, originally Swansea Road Board School. The school was renamed after Edward Philip Collier, a prominent local businessman and councillor, whose family owned the largest brickworks in Reading at the time. The brickworks donated all the decorative brickwork that you can see today. The school was commissioned by the local education board, and the architect was George William Webb, who also designed the original pedestal for the Forbury Lion and some of the grander buildings in Broad Street. This school was built in 1898, and you can see the date on the weather vane on top of the distinctive bell tower, after which the Bell Tower Community Association is named. This picture shows the school at the time when it was opened in February 1899. The school was extended in 2015 to give a capacity of 480 pupils. The original capacity was only around 200. There was a particular challenge in 1908 when the school had 649 pupils, and they had to organise nature walks to make sure that not everyone was at the school at the same time. Schools have always had multiple purposes in the local community, and here's an example from 1919 showing people queuing at E.P. Collier School for bread during the bakers' strike.
Looking around at the three-storey townhouses that line Caversham Road, these retain the bay windows and stone lintels and sills, though unfortunately many of the sash windows have been replaced. The doorways are set in porches with segmental arches, one or two of which have original doors. The dormer window surrounds are often decorated with barge boards and diaper brickwork. Dentilation in the brickwork is a decoration with a tooth-like effect produced by the projection of alternate headers and small bricks. Grey brick courses add to the architectural interest, drawing the eye to window surrounds, and decorated terracotta string courses add to the architectural interest also.
We carry on along Caversham Road towards what is now best known to everyone as TGI Fridays roundabout. Looking back towards Caversham Bridge, the street scene in many ways hasn't changed since the late 19th century. Here is a picture from 1894 showing some flooding in the street which would have been up to ankle depth. You can just see part of the wheels of the cart under water. This would have been the deepest flood since the street was originally built. The only other flood in the area which came close to this was in March 1947. Where water came up through the drains in some streets, but as far as you're aware, no properties actually flooded in this area, although it did affect Lower Caversham considerably worse. If you look, you can see the trees on the left-hand side are still there to this day, although the ones on the right have been felled to allow for widening of the road. You can also see a lot of distinctive brickwork such as the diamond pattern on the end of the house at the end of Brigham Road. We now come to the oldest surviving buildings in the area, and we have recently successfully applied to have these locally listed. The main building is best known in recent times as the shop for Drew's Ironmongers, which closed in 2018, but the building has had a long and varied history. This and the smaller building behind it were built in 1871 on land from the Knollys estate by Henry Pendlebury Dowson, who ran a malting business. Dowson had two other premises, in Malthouse Lane and in Tudor Road near the station, on the site now occupied by the Greyfriar pub. At one time Dowson was the main supplier to Simmons Brewery when they needed extra capacity. After Dowson's death in 1902, the premises were redeveloped as shops and storage. Various businesses occupied these buildings, including a grocer's, a chemical manufacturing company, and, during the First World War, the Goblin Toy Company, which unfortunately had all its stock destroyed by a fire in 1918, just before Christmas, putting the company out of business. Various other businesses subsequently occupied the premises, including two different companies from the automotive industry. Percy Smallbone, a motor factor, occupied the buildings from the 1920s up until the 1950s, and you can still see the Smallbone Limited signage faintly on the side of the building. After that, Brown Brothers and other motor factors and electrical engineers occupied the building until the 1970s, when Drews took over. The smaller buildings at the back are currently leased as offices, and we believe they were originally used by Dowsons for storage.
This was a complex of buildings, part of which has been demolished. The demolished building can be seen on aerial photographs. What survives are the buildings on Caversham Road that are now connected through a link building, and the two buildings to the rear consisting of 3 offices. Here you can see the contrasting brick detailing, including diaper brickwork forming a cross shape near the dental detailing at the eaves. Below this are grey brick string courses connecting the brick segmental arches of the 3 windows. Similar brick arches in contrasting buff-coloured brick can be seen on the facade of the adjacent building. The window surrounds are in polychromatic red brick, and additional detailing is delivered through brick string courses in between the windows which enliven the facade. Similar detailing is visible around the corner, where more of the ground floor level has survived. The doorway has green glazed brick surrounds and a stone arch with keystone decoration that complements the buff colour of the brick segmental arches. More decorative brick segmental arches are visible on the small buildings to the rear. On closer inspection, the infill brick indicates that these doorways were once much wider, possibly to allow for the loading and unloading of horse-drawn carts. There are a series of arches to the rear of the office buildings which add further interest, but the function of which is currently unknown. If you zoom in closer, you will see what looks like holes in the brickwork, possibly evidence of some kind of railings or grille. One possibility is that the area is known to be prone to flooding, and we know that Dowson's maltings flooded at least once, so perhaps they were for ventilation, and perhaps the floor in the storage area had been raised.
As you saw, motor vehicle component suppliers used the former malt house on the Caversham Road. This formed part of an engineering hub, as 67 Caversham Road housed the headquarters of the Buckler Racing Car Company from 1947 until the mid-1960s. The cars were assembled at Buckler's factory in Crowthorne. The components were made and specialist engineering work on upgrading other makes of car were carried out in Reading. The Buckler cars were designed to accept a range of mechanical components to enable buyers to create a lightweight sports car for road use in rallies, trials, speed hill climbing or racing. Some Buckler cars were solely racing cars and not licensed for road use. At the higher end of the market, a Buckler chassis was used for the first Brabham MRD racing car, helping launch what was to become a major team in Formula One racing during the 1960s and 1970s. Earlier, the Monarch Works, where Sureguard Self-Storage Building is, specialised in a slower form of transport. The company was founded by this man, John Warwick. Warwick was a marksman and used his army connections to supply carrier tricycles to the British Army's 1st Bicycle Regiment before moving to Caversham Road. The company's main business was building and hiring out bicycles and tricycles under the Monarch brand. This got the company into the legal textbooks. In 1953, Warwick's lost a legal case which set a precedent. The company had an exclusion clause in its contract, accepting no liability for any injury when using one of its cycles. A tricycle rider was injured when a saddle broke, and the court ruled the exclusion clause did not prevent them suing for negligence. By the mid-1960s, bicycle manufacturing had ceased. The only thing that was manufacturing by then for hire was collapsible golf trolleys. The works mainly did electroplating, stove enamelling and contract engineering, some of it for bucklers. Some of the contracting work involved making parts for Concorde. The works closed in 1972 or 1973, and the Monarch House office block was built on the site.
On the north side of Northfield Road is an interesting house. You can see that the architectural features are slightly different from those of the rest of the terrace that it's in. In particular, you'll notice that it has a bay window, whereas the other ones don't. Looking at old maps, you can see why. This house, in fact, was built around 1875, whereas the rest of the terrace is quite a bit newer, built around 1900, making this house, in fact, the oldest in the area that's surviving to this day. The house is number 14, and the reason why numbers 2 to 12 are no longer there can be seen in old maps as well. These were demolished in the 1970s, along with the Warwick Works.
The two-storey terraces on the opposite side of Northfield Road show a contrast with the earliest example, number 14. There are no bay windows on this terrace, and the segmental arches above the porches and windows are brick. Grey brick emphasises this detailing in a subtle way, though the decorated terracotta string courses are ornate.
On the corner of Northfield Road and Swansea Road, you can see a building which appears to have had an industrial use. There is some kind of bracket protruding from the main workshop part of the building. This may have had some kind of pulley mechanism on it, or perhaps was just used to hang a sign. Moving over towards the right, you can also see an off-licence sign faintly in the brickwork. This was run by the Lipscomb family and was in the same family for many years, from the early 20th century up until the 1970s. Inside the workshop, various businesses were there, including a company called Barnes & Avis, and here's a picture of them, and you can see they ran a radio and electrical repair workshop. One of their specialities was repairing gramophones, and this picture was taken in the 1950s. Walking along Swansea Road and looking back, you can see another view of the bell tower of the school, and if you look at this picture, you can see faintly that this is 1947, and you can just see the floodwater coming up through the drains on either side. So you can see the woman walking the dog down the middle of the road because it was flooded.
The south side of Swansea Road provides a useful point to stop and look at the variation in decoration on the frontages of medium-sized terraces. One side was built in grey brick and the other in red brick. The grey brick frontages have red brick that picks up on the rectangular shapes of the bay windows, a unique shape in this area. These shapes, picked out in brick, juxtapose with the arch and segmental arches of the other openings. The houses opposite are comparatively plain in decoration at first sight, but on closer inspection, the segmental arches and surroundings of the openings are monochrome in colour, whilst the remainder of the facades are polychromatic, showing greater variation in reds, oranges and greys.
We now turn the corner into Cardiff Road. At the far end is a modern industrial area, but before that, on one side, there is a long terrace of houses dated from around 1900. There are a couple of gaps in these houses with modern infill, and this one is particularly notable. To account for this, you need to see this picture, which shows that houses 77 to 81 were destroyed by bomb damage in World War II. Also in Cardiff Road, and backing onto Addison Road round the corner, was the Cox and Wyman printing works. The original buildings date from around 1900, but the company has been going since 1777, and at one time was the oldest printing company in the UK until it finally closed in 2015. The building was subsequently used as a warehouse and was demolished in the first half of 2020. Here are some pictures showing the inside of the Cox and Wyman printing works in the early part of the 20th century, with some of the activities that went on. As recently as 2011, they were still producing more than 50 million paperbacks per year.
The houses opposite the Cox and Wyman works are more typical of the larger two-storey houses in the area. Constructed in polychromatic red brick, the detailing is picked out in buff-coloured bricks around the openings. The sawtooth decoration at the eaves is subtle and picked out through the use of a string course in contrasting grey brick. Further decorative detailing is delivered through the use of stone lintels and sills and round arches of the porches. The bay windows are undecorated, and the survival of sash windows as seen in these examples is rare. The decorative detailing on examples at the north end of Addison Road differs subtly, with scrolls and engravings.
Walking up Addison Road to the junction with Ross Road, you can see this house, which clearly has evidence that it was originally a shop. Areas of Victorian terraces usually had plenty of corner shops, and this area was no exception. And here is a great photo from 1976, showing the owner, Mrs. Evans, proudly standing in front of her store, with a rather uninterested looking cat around the side. We have successfully campaigned to save a number of turn-of-the-century cast-iron lampposts, which would have originally had gas lanterns on them. Many of these were manufactured by foundries in the area between Caversham Road and the River Thames, including H.C. Goodman, which was still operational up to the 1980s, and the Samuel Griffiths Railway Foundry, which closed in the 1920s. These lampposts have now been converted to LED technology, and we hope they will work for many years to come.
Let's take a brief trip into town for some background on the next site. What you can see is McIlroy's department store, known as the Crystal Palace of Reading. The building can still be seen today opposite the Broad Street Mall and houses the British Heart Foundation charity shop and other businesses. As you can see, William McIlroy's name also appears in a stone on the Newport Road side of the New Hope Centre. In 1897, McIlroy defrayed the cost of an English Presbyterian preaching station on the same site. By 1901, the premises had become inadequate, and McIlroy donated the land on which the church was built. The church opened on the 9th of April 1902 as Caversham Road Presbyterian Church. The church got off to a stellar start. The first minister doubled the number of communicants to 228 by 1907. It had 200 pupils in its Sunday school and was forced to run 2 sessions. By 1906, its activities included a men's social club, a sick benefit society, youth Bible classes and a women's guild. As well as McIlroy, another rich and powerful member of the church was E.P. Collier. 6 months into the First World War, it was decided to write out the names of the men serving in the forces in a permanent manner and display them in the church vestibule. This became the church's war memorial. The memorials moved to E.P. Collier School, which after its expansion gave it to Greyfriars Church. It is still looking for somewhere to be displayed. In 1915, the church's name was changed to St. Paul's. After the war, the church's fortunes took a turn for the worse. Attendances dropped to an average of 36 in 1929 from 82 in 1920. However, a new minister arrived in 1930 and help came from another McIlroy, William's son, also called William. He donated a valuable tapestry of the marriage of Joseph and Mary, reportedly stolen from Russia. As you can see from the photograph, while Mayor of Reading for 5 years from 1938, making him the longest serving mayor, he used the church for civic services. By 1937, attendances were back up to 80. After the Second World War, attendances fell, and the building became increasingly difficult to maintain. As a result, the top of the steeple had to be taken down in the 1960s. The United Reformed Church, of which St. Paul's had become part, decided it would be best to sell the site and use the proceeds to restore its other sites. English Heritage said the church was of no significant architectural interest, and so it was demolished. The organ, however, was listed, and was last heard of preserved in Malta. McIlroy's tapestry was auctioned off. The Church of England bought the site and built New Hope. The original dedication stone was split and the reverse used for the new building to mark the continuity in the use of the site for Christian worship.
Some of the original doors survive on many streets, and here is an example from Newport Road. Traditional doors had stained glass panes inserted in the upper two door panels, and the plain timber panels were reserved for the lower portion of the door. This image shows moulded decorations at the top of the bay window columns, a feature of many of the houses at the north end of Addison and York Roads and all along Newport Road. There are examples of foliage, fruit, leaves and vines, and also faces peering out of the foliage, including animal heads, male and female faces, some smiling and many that look quite individual. There are few bay windows where the original stonework is unpainted, probably painted to protect against weathering of the stone. Some owners enjoy them so much that the mouldings of the bays are painted to pick out details in different colours so people can see them clearly as they walk by. There are even some debonair characters, adding a little humour to your day.
After watching this video, it will come as no surprise to you that the Bell Tower Community Association is campaigning for Reading Borough Council to have the area listed as a local area of special character. To find out more about this and the rest of Bell Tower's activities, follow the link on your screen. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video as much as we enjoyed making it.